Gian, welcome to the podcast.
Hey man, how you doing?
Great, man. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So let's kick it off with the quick intro, and then we'll dive deeper. Who are you, and what do you do?
So I'm Gian Nelson. I'm one of the partners of Jano Spirits, a California agave spirit. We started it in 2021 with the idea of using U.S. native agaves for agave spirit production, and seeing how far we can take it. So here we are.
How far we can take it. I like that. How far we can take it. That might be something that we return to. Whenever I talk to a distiller, obviously there's that hanging question of how'd you get into it? Are you, did you get burnt out of something that you originally did? Did you, come from, like an X, Y, or Z background? So I want to ask you about your distilling journey, but I also, just as importantly, want to understand how you came to become a door-to-door agave landscaper. So you can take those in whichever order you want. Just tell us the story. How'd you get into this, and how did you end up with dirt on your hands, knocking on doors?
Dude, I love it, man. Because there's so many cool points here. Because first, I've always said this about the distilling industry, like we are just a bunch of rejects from other industries, And so, like anytime I go to these conventions, you're talking about, like every single time, it's like I came from a chemistry background, I came from, a science background, or crazy guys from I was like selling clothes, and then I just like was doing a little shine on the side. And so I think it's been a really fun trajectory for Hano, for myself. I mean, for me, I came out of the Marine Corps in 2012 with really no sense of direction. There wasn't really a big guide map for me when I was getting out, and I actually fell into wine. As random as that was, being in Orange County, I met with a family. I dated their daughter, and they had a vineyard in a winery there. And I just, something kind of clicked in there where, for the first time, I had the ability to ask why something was being done, and having the creative outlet. You don't really get a lot of that sometimes when you're in a uniform. And so when I got into it, it was a perfect harmony of hard work, science, creativity, art, and kind of expression. And so I was in wine for about 4 years before I got into distilling. And what I really loved about wine was being able to be multifaceted. We were in the fields working in the vineyards. We were, when it was time to make the wine, we were in the crush pad, obviously harvesting and, getting the grapes from the vine all the way into a barrel. And then, any other time of the year, you were bottling, you were taking care of barrels, blending, tasting, working in the tasting room, putting labels on bottles. You were just doing everything, and I really loved that. And so distilling was kind of a great transition for me, because in craft distilling, it was really still coming up in like 2016. And so there really wasn't a lot of craft distillers out there, especially like in California. And I decided it was a really good place to kind of grow. And so I hopped on. I worked with and helped build the Lock and Union distillery in American Canyon, Napa Valley, and kind of cut my teeth there, making single malt whiskey, brandies, gins, anything that really, came in a sack or in a juice or a syrup. And then yeah, finally to Hano was really the cultivation of everything that I loved about wine and spirits. Was how do you take a natural product, like a plant, like an agave, and then harvesting it like we did in wine, doing the process of, fermentation into distillation, and then, finally your expression of what it is. And then having a Mexican American background where agaves were always around you, whether you were in Mexico or I grew up in Southern California, it was just a natural, I don't know, kind of route to take. And so we ended up, yeah, trying to do it in the way that we thought was as authentic and transparent as possible. Like, how can we not make a tequila? How can we not make a mezcal? We wanted to do something that was very unique to California, United States, and I can go all day about finding the Americana agave. And doing our first couple batches by almost serendipity, but then the landscaping part came in because there aren't as many agave americanas being row cropped, in California. A lot of guys that are planting, started with the Teculania, the Blue Weber. And so the only way that like we've been able to kind of grow the agave Americana category has been by literally knocking on people's doors, because the agave Americana has been used as a landscaping plant for a long time, and so a lot of people have these agave Americanas in their front or backyards, and they don't really know that they could be used for something other than ornamental. Or what happens when the quiote grows, the big stalk, and all of a sudden it goes to mush. So it's been kind of fun to be that guy that can knock on the door and go, "Hey, by the way, when that thing ripens up, I can take that out from you, or your little babies that grow from the agave." And so yeah, that's the long-winded answer.
I love that you have the Marine Corps background, because I'm just like, I want to key in on the point that you made about wine being multifaceted, and sort of the process of getting into the wine and spirits industry being more of a nose to tail process for you, where you get to kind of touch the different aspects of not just the product but the process. And all that comes to my mind is Forrest Gump when he's taking apart the rifle. Gump, you are a goddamn genius. And it's like, no, that's not the point. He's not thinking at all. Like, he's the automaton, and you're coming out of this, out of this culture where, at least to a certain extent, the sort of unquestioning, top down, very streamlined decision making without any question to the why or the wherefore is rewarded and good, because it gets results. But now you're in this different industry where the why suddenly seems to leak into every aspect of the process, as opposed to being sort of protected from the process. So that's interesting to me. Before we get further into this, I want to talk about your selected agave of choice, this Agave Americana, because another Californian who has roots in the wine industry, Berko Halloran, he came on our show a little while back, a couple years ago, and he's working with some California sage in this, kind of like as a way of like, developing a unique product with a sense of terroir that is separate from the vermouth Artemisia tradition. So I'm seeing some parallels here. Tell us about Agave Americana.
Yeah. Oh my God, man. That's the cool part about using a very terroir driven natural product or plant, like agave. I mean, agave Americana, like any other agave, are big. What do you call them? They're big water pots. They suck in all the water and minerals, and its surroundings, just like a grape does, and it does it for 7 to 40 years. And so, what we're really trying to do with these agave americanas is not only express the fact that we have native agaves here in the United States that are very unique to us, but that the terroir and the regionality that you can have with these agaves are very similar to grapes or maybe sage. What fascinates me with the whole process is having the abundance of microclimates here in the state of California. We have the mountain ranges, the valleys, the coasts, the deserts, where agaves grow. In all of them, and specific ones mostly. And so, how can we isolate those agaves, grow those agaves, and celebrate where they're from and the people that have taken care of them or the community around them? Because I think they tell a story. They've been there for longer than we have, carried on the backs of Native Americans and other people. And we're really proud of the fact that, we're trying to express those agaves and their flavor profile from where they're from, every time we go to a harvest.
I think that we should talk a little bit as well about the types of agave spirits that are being made in America, because we've gathered at this point that you are trying to do something different from tequila, mezcal, sotol, et cetera, in that you're not in Mexico. Cool. Um, that's like an arbitrary line drawn on a map, and we know that their laws and our laws are different, and there's many reasons why what you're doing is different from that, just in a like a an in principle way. But in practice, what kinds of agave spirits are currently or have been being made in the United States? And kind of where do you situate your approach within that portfolio of things that are already being done, things that are already out there labeled as American agave spirits?
Yeah, man. I mean, so right now it's kind of the Wild West as far as like how American agave spirit is being produced. I think, the main more popular one right now is getting, agave syrup imported from Mexico. Fermenting that syrup, distilling it, and having an agave spirit made from there. Um, and that's a pretty popular approach, and the most accessible approach that we have right now. I was like talking to our friends at Mean Mule, and it was like, agaves in Kansas aren't really a thing right now. They're not a prevalent thing, but from all over the American Southwest, from Texas to here, and now in Hawaii, you're seeing agaves, not only just naturally growing, but now people are thinking about growing them as an actual crop. And then you have the other folks down in Texas, the Desert Door folks growing Sotol, and I think that's a really beautiful story. And actually, uh, we would like to think we have an aligned mentality on what they were doing. First they were naturally harvesting or native harvesting, agaves on people's or not agaves, Sotols on people's ranches, and using them to make a spirit. And here in California, there's a big movement of agave growing. We have the California Agave Council, which we're really proud of being a part of. Um, and right now we're facing a pretty interesting time in agriculture in California. There's obviously a water situation, a drought situation, and so a lot of farmers are using agave as an alternative source for planting. Whether it's on fallowed ground or ripping out our almond orchards and planting agaves for water conservation and drought resistance. And so those are like the main three that I can think of. And I think where we're really paving our own road is that, we're being very specific on how we produce and grow our agave spirit. And so first is by using U.S. native agaves. That's, agaves, like you mentioned, before or after the line was drawn in the sand between Mexico and the United States. There's always a big conversation of whether they're native or not, but we like to think of, if they were grown in the United States, and they still are, then we're going to call those native. And so, for instance, there's the Agave Americana, the most popular one you see. There's the Agave Perii, which has been, very grown by the Native Americans in Arizona for a long period of time. Um, in California, we have the agave shot eye, the Murphy eye, um, Utah ensis. There's just a ton of different varieties that you have here in California. And so what we're really trying to do in the field to start with is, growing these specifically to the environments that they would thrive more in, right? The Agave Perii, Agave Americana, they're very, very multifaceted agaves. They can grow in warm and cold climates, but they're very, very cold and and hardy to the cold environments. So we can grow those basically anywhere, in snow, in the desert if you want. The agave shot eye is a very beautiful, agave that grows in kind of like this Southern California, San Diego area, all the way to Baja. They found, and so very coastal driven kind of agave. So you have all these different agaves that we want to grow. And then also where we take the approach is by using regenerative agricultural techniques, trying to, develop the land and the soils in a very organic way, and using only good practices so we can have, better, higher sugar, tastier agave. Um, which then lends to our fermentation practices. We try to do native fermentation as best as possible, so we can really show the terroir and the agave as best as we can. And so that's what we mean by really moving the blazing our own trails, is just to really trying to do it in a way that is just our own.
Yeah. We're going to put a pin in fermentation. We might come back to that, but I imagine it's a little bit bizarre to somebody like driving on a road, because I've been to California a number of times. I have family there in the Central Valley. And so I've driven through those almond orchards. They look like almond orchards. They look like agriculture. But if I were to drive by an agave farm, I would be like, Are you just growing these for landscaping? Like, just put these in people's yards now? Like, it wouldn't seem like agriculture to me, at least initially.
Mm-hmm.
And I say this with a little bit of background myself. I grew up on a Christmas tree farm, which is not all that similar from agave, because they take around the same amount of time to reach maturity. And you've got some families, you got your firs, you got your spruces, you got your Frasers, you got your whites and your, blues, different types, right? And yeah, so I guess to me, I like, obvious difference is that Christmas trees, unless you're Lance Winters, generally aren't distilled.
That's so
But
true.
uh, like, so I guess to me, I want to go back to you knocking on people's doors, because what happened? Like, what do you do when you knock on somebody's door and they say, "Yeah, go nuts, take the pups, take the whole thing," right? Like, what do you like? Where does that end up for you?
It's really grown into a really fun little community, because y- I think there's a mutual benefit when you knock on someone's door, and you're willing to offer a service to somebody that is basically free to them. And they might even get a kickback of getting a bottle or two when we're done with the harvest. So there's definitely incentives for some people, and we really try to sell it that way. As far as how we're going about the process. Like, we're not out there trying to poach agaves from people and try to, steal them in the middle of the night or anything like that. What ends up happening is we see these agaves. Most of the time, they haven't been incredibly manicured, so they're kind of growing wild. All the pups are growing on pups and pups, and it can be a jungle sometimes. And you kind of go in there and say, "Hey, look, like we'd love to take these agaves, off your hands," and most of the time that person that you're talking to likes the idea that these agaves are going to be used for a better purpose than just sitting, wild in their front or backyard. So, um, and that's grown into a really interesting, like I said, community, because you get to know one another, and like, why did you get those agaves? Sometimes it's people that have had them on their property for 10, 15, 20 years. And, they tell you the story of, oh, I just put one agave there 20 years ago, and now I have all these. And, it'd be really helpful for you to rip them out. Or in the case of our good friend, Henry Garcia, he planted his agave Americanas to make pulque with his father. They're originally from Durango, Mexico, and they had this big, kind of plan to make pulque and sell it to other, migrant farmers and workers in their area. And unfortunately, Henry's father passed away before that could come into fruition. So when we got to meet him, it was, just serendipitous that we were both, looking to use these agaves for a good purpose. to help that, like, Henry and I are both Marines, we're both Mexican Americans. We had a lot of the similar, storyline of, just getting to the points in our lives, and now he's a friend for life. Now he's part of our Hano community, and so when we do these things, it's been really, humbling to be able to knock on someone's door and then immediately become friends, and then they call you, hey, I got more pups, and you're the guy, or oh, my friend has some more pups, and you're the guy, and they just know this is a real, I couldn't even call it grassroots, I don't even know what to call it, agave roots story, and just like literally going to people's yards and trying to do this that way.
Yeah, well, it's real in a way that it's not once the autoclaves and diffusers, and the venture capital kind of enter the equation, and I think that's what resonates with people for sure. Um, so one of the things that you're on record as saying is that fermentation is an emotional roller coaster, right? And you've got the wine background, so fermentation extremely well, very intimately. And what that made me think of when I read that as I was preparing for this interview is that I don't recall, and I listened to multiple agave specific podcasts. I have some good ones in my Rolodex that I listen to on a weekly, bi-weekly basis. And I like to think that I have some friends who know a lot more than I do about agave. And one of the things that I've never heard once in listening to these podcasts and talking to these people is that mezcaleros down in Mexico are even really phased by the fermentation process. So that got me thinking, what are some of the differences as somebody who has Mexican heritage, who is making a Mexican product here in the United States? What are some of the differences that you see? I mean, feel free to talk about fermentation and why it's an emotional roller coaster, but also I'm curious to know if you can speak to that larger kind of like cultural translation question, because I think that's kind of at the heart of this project.
You bring up a lot of great points to talk about, because what we're really dealing with is almost a comparison of like an old world and new world mentality that we go into making agave spirit. It was like the same thing when we talked about the new world and old world in wine. You asked old world wine producers, and I'm generalizing here, why do you do this? Why is it that you guys are doing this? Or why don't you do this? And most of the responses I ever got was, well, that's just the way we've been doing it for 100 years, 200 years, and if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And I like that approach. I think there's some real, it's authentic because they haven't gone off script there, and then you find the onesies and twosies in those regions that are, moving the needle here with how they produce. And so it kind of goes back to like how we're doing it here in the United States. Like there's not a lot of information in the United States about agave fermentation. There isn't a lot of shared knowledge between us and Mexico, for a lot of reasons. They might want to keep their trade secrets to themselves. Maybe there's this kind of like, you know, like the process is so different that it wouldn't even make sense, which has been, done and done again here with how we've had to make agave spirit here. We don't have the equipment like they do in Mexico. Like you said, we don't have the $250,000 auto diffusers. Like we don't have, I'm sorry, the autoclaves and diffusers, and we don't even have ornos. Like we're literally building pits in people's farms and cooking agaves because that's the only method we have here. When we go to
Yeah.
shred agave, we don't have
And
those
then
really.
California sees smoke, right? And everyone's completely unconcerned.
Oh yeah, yeah. I won't even get into that one because it's always fun when you see a white plume of smoke and got to call the neighbors once in a while and go, "Hey, just so you know, we're going to be doing another cook, so don't call the cops on us." But But yeah, so I think there's like a lot of stuff that we're learning here, and especially in American craft distilling, like in my experience, everything comes out of a sack, out of a tote of syrup, everything is already engineered to give you maximum efficiencies, maximum sugar, so you can get the most alcohol and the most bang for your buck, and when you're dealing with a natural product, that isn't the case. Your sugars are going to vary based on your on your yearly temperature swings. If it was a wet year, a dry year, just like grapes are, and so there is that aspect that like we don't really deal with in craft distilling here. And then also a lot of our craft distilleries here are engineered for whiskey production, brandy production, gins, things that are very, very mainstream here versus you go to Mexico, it's, and tequila or mezcal, their process is strictly to make one thing. And that's, their agave spirits. And so kind of going back to the Marine Corps thing was something that we learned very well was adapting and overcoming, and so we've had to basically build our own practices here in California, and every producer that's doing it here does it in a similar way, but we're doing it differently. And so we've basically had to figure out, how do you cook the agave? How do you shred the agave? How are you fermenting the agave? And the reason it's such an emotional roller coaster for us is because we're trying to ferment something that ideally doesn't always have all the fermentable sugars that you want it to have. The inulin conversion can be so mystical, and the fermentation could be such a wild ride because one day it's doing great and you're like, cool, this is going to be done in, a couple days. You come back the next day and it's flat. Like, what's going on here? Like, what are you doing? And so you really have to be in the moment and adapting to the fermentation. And then also you stop taking the science out of it sometimes and you just really kind of go with your gut, which I think the old world guys do that very well. And so I've been really trying to play both fields here. On one hand, I want to be very scientific and driven in a way that's all data points and note taking. And then on the other hand, it's, let it be, see what happens, and I think we obviously have so much to learn, and more repetitions to get under our belts. But the more we do it, the more we understand it, and the more we're honing in on our process and flavor profile.
It's so interesting to have that old world versus new world comparison because I think the US is used to being the new world, but having that new world come with privileges rather than sort of like handcuffs, if that makes any sense. Like we're used to having like that automatic judgment status. What is it? What was the judgment of 1970 what?
Four, I think it was. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was. I was gonna say 74. Man, okay, I was actually gonna be right. Where California suddenly, breaks onto the world stage in a blind judging of wines, and we're like, oh my god, it's possible. You wine from California, and then all of a sudden we're gangbusters, and New World is sexy and bada bada bada, right? So I think and then a similar thing, I guess you could say about American single malt, maybe in a different way, but I think we get to sort of romanticize the rebel status of American single malts is like, we're not a bunch of stodgy old Scottish guys sitting on an island smoking peat, right? Where we get to do different things, and because we don't have the rules and the set of cultural expectations, we can go out and be, unique. But when it comes to agave, like it really does feel like you are trying to engineer what has been occurring in Mexico for hundreds of years, almost from the ground up.
Mhm.
And to be fair, I don't know where you stand on this, but if I were trying to imagine myself into the viewpoint of a mezcalero from Mexico, and I were to hear about American agave producers, I'd be like, yeah, yeah, right. Like not in a million years would I ever share with them, or like those guys are just off doing crazy things. They're never going to be able to do what we do down here. So all of that leads me to a question that I didn't send you beforehand, but I'm curious to get your thoughts on this. What do you think it would take? Like, let's just do an imagination exercise. Like, can you imagine a world in which a Mexican bartender, because Mexico City and other regions of Mexico is just blowing up in terms of the cocktail scene, what do you think it would take for a Mexican bartender to import an American agave spirit specifically for use on their agave spirit sipping menu or on their cocktail menu? Because to
Oh
me,
man,
that would
yeah.
be, wouldn't that be like the definitive American agave has made it moment?
Yes, and that's exactly what I want to say, because that's like almost the highest compliment you can give us is like if you do a tasting with like Jano and a lineup of different mezcals, because our spirit has a lot more of a mezcal kind of style. It's cooked in an earthen pit. It has a lot of the same open top fermentation practices, a lot of the double pot distillation. So when we kind of taste, with Jano, we kind of we'll taste other mezcals with it, to kind of go. And the highest compliment we've ever gotten was, wait, this is American? And it's like, this isn't mezcal. And the second we hear that, it's like, oh my God, like this is what it was all about, and I think that's like what can be done, because there's other regions in the world that are making agave spirit. The Australians are going gangbusters right now. The South Africans are, reinventing their agave spirit. There's, South American agave spirit that's happening. Hawaiians, Californians, the rest of the United States. So I think, this is going to be a conversation in the future where it's like, what is now the definitive definition of like what something should taste like? You know what I mean? And that's going to be really interesting, because the Karoo from South Africa is going to taste different than the Agave Americana or the Agave Perrier from the United States, just as like a Salmiana from San Luis Potosi or a Duran Justice from Durango is going to taste differently than an Espadin from Oaxaca, or a Blue Weber from Jalisco. So I think we're really kind of like pushing the envelope on what can be defined. And I think the only thing that I really concentrate on is when it comes to like having those conversations is quality. You need to have quality be the forefront of the conversation, and make sure that whatever you are making is done with full transparency. I know the additive thing is a really hot topic right now, but for us, it's like it doesn't get more authentic than making it as in these I wouldn't even call them primitive ways, but very ancestral ways of making it. And I think the world's going to have a really good time trying to pick itself out. One other thing I'd love to talk about too, that we talk about, the Mexican American borderline, is something that's been really interesting too. Is we have a huge Chicano population here in the United States. Mexicans that were born here, and grew up here or immigrated here. I was born in Mexico, immigrated here with my family. My dad is American, but you know, it's been a really cool conversation too with other Chicanos or Mexican Americans, because it's nice to be able to drink something that was made by someone like you, that can identify this as you, that has the same story as you, maybe growing up in the same neighborhoods, having the same kind of like family parties on the weekends, or seeing your relatives in Mexico once a year or so, and then be able to drink something together and say, hey, this is ours. This is a blend of all of our cultures. I mean, California has so many different cultures and people here that we really strive to make this a very Californian product for anyone who identifies as a Californian. And so that's been really important. So when I go see my family in Mexico City, it's been really fun, because there's no objection to what we're doing with them. They think it's awesome that we're making an agave spirit, and how they're able to say, yeah, my gringo cousin is you know an agave spirit maker, not a mezcalero, but they use that term very freely. But yeah, that's been a really cool experience with all this too. Yeah.
Well, again, I'm drawn back to this new world, old world comparison because, one of my favorite quotes is that morality, like art, means drawing a line somewhere, right? And if you go back to old world, this goes back to a recent conversation I had with Devin Trevathan at Liba Spirits about, like authenticity and like what it means to go into a traditional distilling area where things are marked off by lines. If you're on this side of the line, you're in Champagne. If you're on that side of the line, you're fucking out of luck, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Your bottle price just dropped by 40%. So it's interesting that like the way that the way that I think about it is like when you're talking about having these like backyard parties growing up where you were introduced to these flavors, in a common context with these other Chicanos whose aunties are making the same types of dishes. You've got this shared flavor palette, I guess, right? And
Hmm.
that informs the way that you make spirit. So if you use your palate influenced by these cultural and culinary experiences growing up to then make a spirit that tastes good to your brain, because flavor happens in the brain, then it makes complete sense why somebody who looks like you and has similar cultural experiences as you might be able to walk up to that spirit and have a connection with it that other people don't, who don't have that shared flavor palette. And I guess the reason why I say that is because America is supposed to be this melting pot. But well, what happens when you throw all the colors and everything into the same thing? It turns into mud. It turns into the nasty greenish brown, like indistinguishable gravy where you can't pick out the different kind of shades of experience as clearly as you would if you would say, well, we're focusing on California. We're focusing on, this specific stripe, and we're using, this approach to go after that stripe of the American experience. And so there's a clarity that comes from that I see as being influenced by that old world, but also still having that element of fusion. I don't know if any of that makes sense to you.
It does, and I think there's a lot there because I think as Californians we do have a kind of a pioneering spirit. If you look at all the history of our ancestors coming west, they had to make it, they had to persevere. They came here with an idea that there was prosperity here, and they probably quickly realized that it wasn't all just the gravy train out here, and we had to work hard to make it. And and same with my Mexican ancestry too. They had to work just as hard coming here and trying to make a name for themselves. And I guess what I'm trying to say is like there are common stripes in a lot of the American mindset, and I think that we really try to celebrate that, by working hard and by doing it the right way and just not cutting any corners. And there's kind of of an open mindset too, of like we said, we're not straddled by tradition here. We can do whatever we want, and when it comes to like agave, that's what's so freeing about, trying to figure this out without any strings attached. I'm not trying to make a tequila. I'm not trying to make a mezcal. I'm not trying to stomp on anyone's toes, when it comes to making the spirit. We're doing this purely out of love, and purely out of just passion for the plant, for the people that identify with it and their heritage. And so we're just, we're doing it, in a way that pays its respects to the old world. But in the new world, we're pushing the envelope. How can we farm with better practices? How can we avoid some of the mistakes or some of the those traditions already set in stone? How can we make higher sugar, better conditions for these agaves? And so those are a lot of things to talk about. When we're fermenting as well, how do we pay attention to some of those fermentation practices that maybe just get glossed over because it's just a quote unquote fermentation. One of my partners here, he's a fermentation master. I mean, he's worked for some of the best cult wineries in Napa Valley. And so he's taking what he's learned from the wine part of it and applying that to agave fermentation. And then, the years that I've been making American single malt and brandies and gins and whatnot, taking my experience behind a still and trying to push the envelope there by trying to, really make the cuts as precise as possible, or how do you use the tails in a way, or the esterification of the acid from the fermentation, to get you a better ester profile. Like those are the things that maybe don't get talked about all the time in a a little mezcal still, down in Oaxaca. Who knows? I would love to, I would love to have more conversations with them. But those are the things that we get to focus on when you don't have any baggage or any kind of anybody that I wouldn't say look over your shoulder, but who cares? We're doing what we're doing.
Yeah. Well, all of this makes me curious about, I guess, I mean, you and I are bought in. American Agave? Yeah, I'm in. You're in, obviously. It makes me wonder about everyone else, though. So, in a day and age where most American Agave spirits are reasonably expensive, I mean, maybe you can speak to the price of your spirits. And I mean, I'm not saying that any of these costs are unjustified. It's just at the end of the day, math, right? But in a day when objectively it's just expensive to make these agave spirits, I mean, how do we get these in people's hands? What's the value proposition? And like, as I'm looking to the future, I mean, like, how do you see things evolving here?
The evolution is going to be really interesting because, yeah, right now, why the costs are so high is because the two factors are really the fruit cost. You're talking about the agave, right? You are making very small batches with very high costs because there isn't a streamlined operation here that can make your cost efficient, right? So, like, I make a barrel of whiskey, right? I'm going to buy the pound, and it's going to be, whether it's good malt, bad malt, or not bad malt, but just, less expensive malt. That's going to dictate your overall cost. You're going to look at your yeast, your enzymes, but everything else is pretty fluid, which makes your efficiencies really high, right? That malt is jam packed with starches and enzymes. So all you got to do, I mean, easy enough, is just go through the process, and you'll probably end up with really good efficiencies. Versus agave, on any given day, my bricks can change by 5 or 10%, which is going to change my overall output of a bottle cost. And especially when you get such a low yield for as many agaves as you get, I mean, historically, and this is in every case, you're going to get about 10 cases or 120 bottles per ton of agave. So per 2,000 pounds, right? So if you're looking at doing, 2 tons, you're getting 20 cases, that's 240 bottles. But, to process 2 tons, to harvest 2 tons, all the labor costs and all the other costs associated, you got to jam pack into maybe 240 bottles. And so you really, so what's kind of currently happening is, guys in California and probably other places are trying to figure out how do you streamline that, which is a very American thing to do, is try to get it like super industrialized and whatnot. But I think we're going to be able to kind of change that narrative is going to be in the next, 5 to 7 years. There's going to be way more agave available out there, especially in California. For the last maybe 5 years, there's been a huge growth of now agave farmers, whether they're hobby farmers that, just grow them on their piece of land, or real professional guys in ag who are ripping out orchards and putting in agaves. They're all waiting for that 7 to 10 year mark where they can finally activate their agaves and be able to sell. And so I think what's going to happen is, with the more availability of agave, and then you're also going to be able to harvest more at a certain time, you're going to be able to make more bottles per production run equals less cost per bottle, and making it more attractive. Will you ever get to that, like, premium or lesser than premium price? That'll be a good question, because there's also a labor cost here that is, compared to like Mexico and other places, is astronomically high. comparably. And so you're just not, I don't know if you're ever going to get there. And if you are, I would be really afraid of people cutting corners or looking to those really efficient ways of, cooking agaves and fermentation processes. Then at the end of the day, then what's it going to be worth? Where I see Hano kind of going with that is especially that is trying to get as many of those native agaves in the ground, or finding those agaves in the ground and producing more, but never really straying away from our process or what we really believe in, and just allowing us to stay small, because we want to focus on it. We want to spend every ounce of our time, whether it's 120 bottles or 1,200 bottles, they're all going to be made the same for us. But what we're also doing is helping other people, um, by lending our expertise, and there's going to be a big surge of other craft distillers, I believe, in the United States, that once agaves are more available, are going to take a shot at making their own. And they'll probably quickly learn that, it's not as easy as, taking a toad of syrup and fermenting it and just sending it through a still, that there's other factors here. So I think some of us right now are trying to lay the foundation for other people, so that way they can kind of go ahead and give it a shot and have a higher success rate than some of us had in our beginning days.
It's interesting how you describe, using literal, bottles, cases, and tons, the sort of natural limits that nature places on this process. And I think, thinking back on many of the spirits and traditions and practices that yield some of the most incredible flavors, it seems like there's some wisdom in understanding those natural limits and using them as guidelines, as opposed to, trying to fly a little too close to the sun and, manufacturing yourself into essentially vodka. And then what do we see from there? Vanilla, right? Like, we've seen this story.
Oh yeah.
Anybody who's paying attention has seen how the story plays out. And so I do think, you were mentioning, one of the benefits of being in this quote unquote new world agave tradition is that you can learn from some of the mistakes that are, maybe currently even playing out in other places. And I think, to me, that seems like a really nice one to try and avoid. And it's not difficult to do that, right? Like you're kind of describing that this thing has some natural limits, and hey, if we kind of stay on these rails and are willing to pay a little bit more for it, maybe a lot more for it, as the case may be, then we can at least avoid that trap and sort of the economic and environmental, tire fires that can ripple outward from that. So that's a discussion perhaps for a different episode. But tell me a little bit more about your portfolio, because we've been dancing around the fact that you make these delicious spirits. Tell us about your lineup, and give us some rough price points. And obviously, our listeners are going to want to know where they can try these things that people walk up to and say, "Wait, that's not mezcal."
Yeah, I mean, so the portfolio is super easy for us because we make it by batch, and the batches kind of line up by vintage at this point, and so we had our first batch come out. I believe it was 2021 or two. Man, it's been whirlwind. And then batch three came, I'd say shortly right after, but basically we were making 10 to 15 cases at a time, or even 15 to 20, and in our last one. And basically, it's pretty simple. Right now, there's only Agave Americana out there, and like we talked about, we're gone, and we're finding, and cultivating these relationships with these agave growers, ranchers, whoever would be willing to help us out, and then for us to help celebrate them and tell their story. And so that's what's really been kind of like now in the future is, batch two is almost sold out, to be completely honest with you. it's been very humbling to see the interest in not only just the consumer but the industry. People that are willing to take a chance on your product by putting it on the back of their shelf or on their storefront, and be able to say, hey, you know what, I'm going to take a chance, and help you out, and we do our best to to help them by supporting them, and you know coming in and tasting them on it, or giving education classes, or just sending people that right way. A good friend of ours, Chris Sinclair, has a great bottle shop in Sacramento. The Good Bottle Shop also has an amazing podcast. But he's been one of the earliest supporters of not just Jano, but California Agave. And it's great to have a friend like that you can go in and get the real perspective of someone on his end of what are people saying about your agave spirit. Are they coming back and buying another bottle, or are they just intrigued and just want it as a memento? Who knows. um, and so all of that really helps us kind of look to the future, because we're planning on doing some harvests this year, um, in a way that really accelerates what we're talking about. Working with some friends down south of us who have a couple of agaves that need to get ripped out. Well, instead of sending them to the compost pile, let's make some spirit out of it. And if we get 5 to 10 cases out of it, fantastic. But what we really want to do is tell the story of the agaves, the people that grew them, and use some native fermentation practices that we're working on, even using the well water from that property to cut the spirit down. So we can really make a very terroir driven agave spirit. And that'll be one of the next batches. And if someone else calls us from a different part of the state and says, hey, I got a couple agaves, would you be willing to look at it? Absolutely. And what's your story? Why do you have these? And just keep doing that until, forever. And, so I think for us, it's pretty easy to do that. And then, yeah, once we have enough of the other agaves in the ground and we're able to harvest them ourselves and make them, then we might make larger production batches. But, we're talking a matter of, 10 to 20 cases more. We're not going from 10 cases to 1,000 cases. We're going to keep doing that and pushing the envelope and getting more reps under our belt, so we can actually, when we get to the 100 cases, we can do them to the best of our ability.
Yeah, exactly. Scale takes work if you want the quality to scale as well. So if someone who's listening right now is curious and wants to pick up a bottle for research and development purposes, either now or the next time you release a batch, what's a rough price point, and where would they stay on the lookout for these bottles to pop up?
They're $120 on the shelf. You can find them at, the Good Bottle in Sacramento, Old Town Tequila in San Diego. They're like the agave shop. Oh my God, they're amazing, and they ship. They're incredible. And if you go to our website, hanospirits.com, you can find a map of where you can find our spirits. And most places either ship or have them available. And if not, just kind of send a message to us, and we try to do our best to guide you in the right way and see who's in stock as of right now.
Awesome. Well, that's good for getting bottles. Now, getting in touch with you personally, let's say I'm somebody in California who's got some pesky agaves that I need managed and perhaps turned into juice. Or if I just want to follow you on social media, where do I go to get in touch?
Yeah, so my social media, so we have Jano Spirits for our Instagram. My personal Instagram is El Jano Blanco. You can find me there. And if you have any questions on agave, feel free to message us there. We're always around to say hello, and respond to any questions you might have. And yeah, I was going to say those are our two there. We have a contact page on our website too, if you want to come say hello. But yeah, we're out there. We got a fun little agave network. So you'll find us.
All right. Well, Gian, that's perfect. We'll link to everything on the show notes page. How's about some quick lightning round questions?
Let's do it, man.
All right. Desert island scenario. You get to take one bottle of straight spirits with you, and you've also got a cocktail as well. Either all the ingredients are on hand or you've got it on draft in, kind of like a Gilligan's Island style situation. What's your cocktail and what's your straight pour for a desert island with no prospect of rescue?
Oh man. Okay. So cocktail, I'm the simplest dude ever. I'm a ranch water guy until the day I die. If all it is agave, sparkling water and a lime, I'm literally like, that's all I drink ever. If we ever hang out, you already know my order because it's literally from here to any coast or country. It's the same thing. Straight pour though, to be completely honest with you, man, there I will tell you if I can bring one, it would be the mezcal I got when I took my wife on our honeymoon back to my hometown of Zihuatanejo, Mexico. It's in the state of Guerrero, and we got in contact with a guy at the hotel who said he knew a guy who made mezcal up in the foothills above where we were staying. And next thing you know, he brings down a couple liters of like the little water bottles. It's like moonshiners have the mason jars, like Mexicans have old water bottles. And so I bought a couple liters out of that, and it has been the best mezcal I've ever had. It is the pinnacle of what I think it is. It's 100% cuprieta, and it's just the memory, but also the flavor is just incredible.
Mm.
There's a sweetness there that I've never tasted in any other mezcal, and it's just so soft at such a high proof. I would love to shake that person's hand, whoever made that.
Mm.
Yeah, I'll be buried with that bottle.
With that water bottle, it'll never decompose.
Exactly.
Perfect.
Exactly.
Um, I love it. I love it. All right. Next question. Now, aside from Agave Americana, which has a Spanish name, they also grow it in Mexico, which is something you haven't mentioned yet. What are your favorite agave varietals to drink if you are, going to pick up a bottle of either single varietal or maybe a targeted ensemble mezcal?
Yeah. So yeah, the fact that the agave Americana, right, is like native to like the southwestern part of like Texas, and obviously it's was probably grown in the same area in Mexico, just across the Rio Grande there. Which, funny enough, like some of my favorites that I drink are from Durango, San Luis Potosí. I love Durangensis. I love Salmiana. I think there's a kind of almost a dustiness, almost an earthiness that you get that I don't always get with like an espadín. So any kind of raicilla has always been really great. Bacanara has been obviously popular, and I've got to try some of them. And then ensembles, like I think Ray Campero makes some incredible ensembles. La Luna is one of my favorite mezcal brands. I think they're just like my super go-to for whatever. So, but I would say my favorite varietals would definitely be like Salmiana, Durangensis. Yeah, those have been some of my favorites to drink so far.
Awesome. Awesome. If you could have a drink with anybody in the world, past or present, who'd it be? Where would you go? What would you drink? Just kind of paint us a picture.
Man, I think I will have to go super cliche here and probably say like Ernest Hemingway. I think, like his whole relationship with alcohol and like, how he wrote about it in his books were so fascinating to me when I did read and learned how. But I think he just has a really good way of having a relationship with spirit that I don't think a lot of people have. Maybe Mark Twain or someone else of those eras would do really well. But just to be able to like yeah, have a night of drinking with him would be probably up there.
I have a feeling he could probably put you down. He had a lot of practice. I'm gonna take a spin off of this question that came to me as we were talking, not because you mentioned it, but just because we're on in that universe. If you could make a pachuga using any sort of crazy ingredients, like is there anything? Have you ever been like, man, someday I'm just going to throw this in the still and see what happens, that sort of thing? If you could make a crazy pachuga, no price limits, no rules whatsoever, what would you be throwing and or hanging in the pot?
I think I would take a super terroir approach almost like St. George did, of just like what is around me that smells and tastes good and isn't going to kill me. So
Yeah.
I think we've had those conversations of just like, well, all right, who's getting married, or like what celebration are we going to have? Like who can we make a bechuga for? And basically, if we're doing a harvest in like the central coast of California, where it's very like bay laurel and all these like beautiful natural grasses and coastal plants and flowers, like how can you do that when you're making a batch from down there? Or if you're in the desert, can you use the desert sage, and can you use manzanitas and yuccas and all these different beautiful things of the desert? So if it were up to me, like that's where it would be very very meaningful to me to make a pechuga, because I appreciate the regionality of pechuga. Some people are putting turkey, some people putting deer, iguanas, they're putting different dragon fruit and all this beautiful stuff. And I mean, in California, it's just a platter of different spices and botanicals here that you can make something really, really special.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and go out on a limb and say I'm okay if the iguana never makes it onto my platter. In watching Anthony Bourdain, I think the only time I've ever seen him just like straight up reject food was when he went to Mexico and they served him iguana, and he was just like, you know what? This tastes vile, and I don't think there's any rescuing it. So I'm going to go ahead and say, yeah, I'll pass on the iguana. But last question. Do you have any controversial views or beliefs, either in the spirits or the larger drinks world?
I don't know if they're controversial. I would say I'm pretty stubborn when it comes to how I think about spirits. I'd like to think of spirits as having to be made in a very authentic way, right? So for me, it's like when we're talking about making whiskey, like I try to use the best malts, the best barrel profile, the aging it the old fashioned way of just letting it sit in a warehouse for as long as I can. And, so when I see a lot of what the industry does, I mean, personally, I've never really looked at a lot of those as guidelines for me or any kind of like inspiration. So I guess for me, in the craft that I make, I just try to keep it as authentic as possible. And yeah, that's all I got to say about that.
Well, I think if we've learned anything from this conversation, it's that authenticity is a byproduct of intention. And you certainly can't get there unless you've got the intention. It also comes at a price. And it seems like there's two ways you can react to that, either as a maker or a consumer. You can say, no thanks, or you can say, ooh, that's exciting. And I think we know, based on the hour we've just gotten to spend together, where you fall on that particular spectrum. So, Gian, I want to thank you for all of the insights you provided here about the American agave industry at large, about the process of taking California and really helping to make a name for your region, and for the great work that's being done there by you and by others. Just remind us one more time, where can we find you in the digital space, and give us just the brand and all that good jazz.
Yeah, Eric, it's been an honor, man. Honestly, I wanted to thank you first for having a platform for a lot of the craft distillers out there that want a voice. And I've listened to your stuff, and you've really done a great job of allowing people to really tell their truth and their story. So thank you for from all of us. And you just had our good friend Devin on there. She's our gal, man. Love that girl to death. But as far as me, Hano Spirits, you can find us on Instagram, Hano Spirits, or my personal Instagram of El Hano Blanco. Check out our website, hanospirits.com. You can find all the retailers that carry our product, and then look out for more. We're doing some more harvests this year. And if you'd ever like to participate, I'm talking about you, your listeners, the world. If you ever want to come by and get sweaty in an agave field with us, let us know. We'll get you on the list, and we'll make some cool spirit.
Bro, I can't think of a better way to end and to sign off here. Let's get sweaty, and cheers to you.
Cheers, amigo. I love it.